this week's movement breakdown, we're gonna talk about the Barbell RDL. Probably my absolute favorite movement in existence. Absolutely great for all things glute, hamstring, posterior chain development. And we're gonna run through how to actually set this up, how to get the most out of it, and some mistakes and general errors to go ahead and try to avoid. So first things first, setup. So I'll see people every once in a while perform barbell RDLs and pick it up from the floor. I generally try to recommend against that. The reason being, the RDL is not meant to be from the floor as an active movement anyway. The range of motion is going to be more isolated in that top half of the deadlift. So whenever you're starting from the floor, you're wasting energy and you're inherently limiting yourself with that first rep. I would much rather see people start from the rack where they can unrack it here, step back, very small, clear themselves of the J hooks, and then perform their set. In saying that, you wanna make sure that the J hooks are at a good height so that you don't actually have to expend more energy. So again, you should be able to just use your legs, hips, lift it off, baby step back into position, and then go. So hand position, you want your hands to be just outside your thighs here, right? So if they're too close, you're just obviously going to rake your legs. If they're too far apart, it's gonna turn into a snatch grip movement and your upper back is gonna become the limiting factor. That's not what we want. So just outside the thighs here. And then from this point, we're actually gonna run through what the movement looks like. So step back, clear slightly. And like what I just mentioned, it is meant to be a top end range of motion deadlift, right? So that is just going to be a hip hinge, bar goes just below the knees, and then you reverse that, come back up to the top, all in the glutes, all in the hips. That's the way that we need to think about this. So here, hips are gonna go back just far enough to clear the bar from the knees. Here, and then back up to the top. And then from the side, you'll be able to really see how we're going to go from this top end motion right here. Keep that bar close to the thighs. That bar should never actually drift away at all. Right below the knees and then all the way back up. So keeping your abs braced, keeping your pelvis neutral. And then back to the top. So all together. And then when the set is over, walk it right back in and re-rack it. So now we are going to go over some really common general mistakes that a lot of trainees will make whenever they're doing their deadlifts, or excuse me, their RDLs, excuse me. Very different. So with that being said, we'll roll right into the first mistake, which is turning your RDLs into a deadlift. So RDLs, again, top end range of motion. If you go beyond that knee, too far beyond the knee, you turn it into either a conventional deadlift or a stiff leg deadlift. So the idea here is you should be pushing your hips back as far as they can go, their terminal hip extension. Anything beyond that turns into actual lengthening of the hamstrings and going through hamstring flexibility and pushing that mobility component there. Not really what we want, right? So this is meant to be a very compact hip hinge. So if it turns from this, which is an RDL, into that becomes a stiff leg deadlift because our hamstrings are now the primary factors rather than our glutes. So whenever we're moving through our RDL movement, compact, short range of motion, not a full stiff leg deadlift, not a full conventional deadlift. Second thing that we're looking for here is we're actually looking for a consistent bend of the knee. So whenever we're performing this, if we have our knees fully locked, again, turns into a stiff leg deadlift. If we're performing the movement and we squat down, as we're performing it, turns into either a squat or a conventional deadlift. So the knees have to be soft. I like to think of them as soft knees whenever we're performing this. So it's here. They can stay a little bit bent, that's totally fine. You just don't want to actually shift the tension either into the hamstrings by extending your knees or your quads by flexing your knees. So it should be right in that middle point here of hips back, hips forward, hips back, hips forward. Soft knees, soft knees. The last thing I'm gonna do is we'll talk about what your back should look like, how to actually keep a neutral spine, but I will actually put on straps because I feel obligated to say that everybody should always use straps whenever performing RDLs, because it is a deadlift motion and you don't want your grip to be the limiting factor. So this last one we're gonna talk about is spinal position and hip position, how that relates together. We always wanna be shooting for a neutral spine, neutral low back. A lot of times people will overarch because they're overcompensating for the ability to actually keep their abs tight, keep their glutes engaged, and prevent trunk flexion. Everybody's always focused so hard on not rounding their back like this whenever performing deadlifts. They overcompensate and do this during their deadlifts. That's not what we want either. Again, we want neutral. So instead of this, we want this. We want stacked so that you can perform your deadlifts from the most mechanically strong positions possible. So I will just go through a few really perfect reps here. Perfect for me. Again, unracking. Making sure that my glutes, my abs are engaged, my low back is neutral, my pelvis is neutral. Right below the knee, not any further. All the way back up. Same knee bend, all the way back up. Low back neutral, glutes engaged, and we're done.